Hi there. This is Crystal Crumb, aka Crumdinger, aka Bram, depending on where you meet me on the internet. This video is a demonstration / tutorial for Sleepy, an acquaintance of mine on Discord who is interested in the 301, and specifically in using it for stereo filtering in sample playback. This is the patch I'll build up in this video. It's relatively simple. It is just a stereo chain with a sampler, a filter, or a stereo filter rather, and some modulation routed to various parameters. And all that modulation is hands-on from a fader bank. Off screen I also have a Westlick performer, one channel of which is sequencing gates and picking slices in our sampler. And then the fader is also manually controlling parameters inside of the 301. This patch includes independent faders for control over left and right filter cutoff, which you can hear now. And then a single fader for resonance on both. And faders for slowing down sample playback speed and offsetting slice selection. Okay, I'm going to initialize the patch and start at the beginning so I can build it up for you. So first of all, the 301 has 4 channels of output, and they are all separate and in mono by default. We need to gang 2 together to form a stereo channel. So you can see that on the left, the out number changes as I press each respective button. The 4 buttons represent channels 1 through 4, and to gang 2 together for stereo, we will just press 2 buttons at once, and it will merge the channels as long as they're adjacent. And you can have any valid combination of stereo and mono. You can have 1 mono, 2, 3 stereo, 4 mono, etc. And then you'll see that these lights here can be switched. And what that means is that while you're patching in a stereo chain, you can select whether you're patching with the left or right output of a given signal, or a unit signal. So that's pretty nice and handy. And now that we have our stereo chain, we can start inserting units. You can do this either by putting the cursor in here, in the empty space, and just clicking a soft key in the empty space, and that'll bring you to the unit chooser. Pressing cancel to exit, or in anywhere where you can insert a unit validly, down here on the S3 key, there will be insert above it, and you can click that. And as you fill up the space with units, this will be your only way to do it, because there will be no empty space to click a soft key on. Instead, you'll be controlling parameters with these buttons. So first of all, I always start with a limiter, and that's just to protect the ears while patching, because it's a fully modular environment and it's really easy to wire up feedback. You don't want to blow your ears out with some crazy signal. And then I also got a fixed high-pass filter, and 27.5 is good, but that just blocks the DC, so any really slow-moving control voltages that may enter your control or your audio path will be filtered out by this high-pass filter, and that just gives you a little more headroom. DC can eat up a lot of volume in your audio output. So now we've filled up all our available space on screen. we'll have to start using S3 to insert stuff, so we're going to do that. And then I'll just scroll through here a little bit, and you can see that there are a huge number of units, lots of time-based effects, lots of filtering. Some of these are not actually built in. These are things I've downloaded that other people have made, like Joe Filbrun and others. But you get basically all of the various low-level modular functionality that you would need to produce any higher-level functionality. So people always ask what the 301 is, and my answer is that it's just a modular synth in digital form with a really clever and easy-to-grasp UI. It's not really a question of whether it can or can't do anything, it's just a question of whether you have the imagination and pluck to build what you need to get. But right now we just need the variable speed player, which is in our recent, so I can just click a soft key underneath that, and it appears in our chain. I'm going to change a few things. I want to turn fade down to 0 so that our slice playback is not faded in at all. We're going to be doing drums, so we want every sample to hit as close to the incoming trigger as possible. And on that note, we will load a sample. I already have this one in mind. It's just a selection of audio from a patch I made on my Hearthstone at 2. And we can press enter on that to grab it. I don't know why it is actually playing right now, but we want to set it to once, and play extent is already on slice, but that's what we would like so that when we gate it, it doesn't continue to play audio beyond the boundaries of the slice. And then we also want to change the CV slice mapping to 12 tet, which means that it will assume that we're using volt per octave signal to select our slice, and the Westlicht is going to be sending volt per octave to the Varispeed sampler in order to select our slices. Everything else we don't really need to worry about, so we can just press up. Normally we would have to either manually or automatically slice our sample in order to use the slice control and actually select bits of audio. But since I've already used this, the slices remain in the file, or there's another file called the .slc that denotes slices. So we don't have to worry about that, but you can do all kinds of really careful cutting up of audio with slicing. So now we are getting audio when we gate the sampler, and we want to do that automatically, of course, with the performer. My performer's gate is G1. And there's actually something peculiar. There's a bit of latency between triggering and slice selection, so if you don't put a short delay after this gate, then you may play a sample back before the correct slice has been picked. So you just need to insert a micro delay and put that on 1 millisecond, and that's usually more than enough to pick the correct slice every time a gate hits. And then we're going to do the slice control, which is also being handled by the performer externally. And I know that that is on B2. And then the Westlicht is sending out bipolar signal to control this. So we're going to put this at 0.5, and we'll set the gain to 1 so that our incoming CV has full range control over this slider. And I have another video that is all about doing random slice selection with the Varispeed player, which goes over the ins and outs of the UI involved in making this happen. But now if I press play on the Westlicht, we should get our little pattern. And you can see it selecting our various samples here. Pretty beautiful. Also, you can zoom in on any control by hovering over it and pressing enter. So now what I would like to do is add control over the speed parameter. So we'll just select that, and then down here over S1 for any control that has a modulatable subchain, like a modulatable control, you can just press this and insert what you want to control it with. In this case, we're going to control it with the fader bank. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to sc.cv, and I want port 1, which is the first fader on the fader bank. And you can see on the bottom screen there a graphical representation of my signal as I move the fader. So all this sc.cv unit does is pipe in the digital information from the fader module and transmit it at the output here, wherever it needs to go. And because I want speed to go down as I push the fader up, we're going to set the gain to -1 by rotating the encoder to the left. And that should give us some fun little speed control. Very nice. But maybe to make it a little more performable, a little more easy to tune maybe, I'm gonna insert something called a grid quantizer, which will restrict our smooth control to a number of equidistant levels. So you can see as I go up that we're getting 12 distinct plateaus across the range of this fader. And I only want 4, because that only gives me a few levels to think about as I'm playing this fader. They're basically like presets on the range of the fader. But I also want there to be a little smoothness in the control after that grid quantizer, so I'm going to insert a slew limiter, which is, a classic modular little bit, and just bring the slew time down slightly. But now I'll have my 4 separate channels or presets, but they'll smoothly interpolate between one another, which gives it just a little bit of like pleasing lag in terms of when the speed changes. That's nice. And now I want to be able to offset the slice selection. So what I mean is that our bias is here at 0.5. That's our default value. But I want to be able to move a slider so that I can select a different range of the control, essentially. And that'll let me just pick an entirely new set of slices with a single fader. So I will just insert an offset here, which is exactly like an offset in physical modular. It just gets added to the output signal. So if I bring it up, you can see that our signal is at the very top of the range here. But I want that at 0, and you can modulate this offset. So I'm going to do that again with a fader, and I'll use fader 2. And then we just set the gain to 1. And you should see our little modulation fader on the right of our bias there for the slice control moving up and down as I move the fader. We can see what that sounds like. And you can hear at the top of the range, it kind of sounds like a beat repeat. That's because we're just at the end of our sample, and so it's picking the same slice as I hit the maximum range. I don't know if there's a way to like wrap it around, but it's fine. I actually like that beat repeat style effect at the top of the range. It just gives me another little performative dimension to play with. So I think that's everything for our sampler. So now I'm going to work on building the stereo filter, and there are definitely way more elegant ways to accomplish this sort of thing. Like there are multi-band processing units that you can fill up per band with whatever you want, but this is just like a quick and dirty and easily demonstrable way to accomplish stereo filtering on the 301. So we're essentially going to mute our sampler with a VCA. So nothing will travel beyond this point in the chain without the VCA being turned up, but we're just going to leave it down. And that means that we can use mixers to the right of the VCA in order to like patch or molt the sampler into two hard panned left and right mixer units that also will contain filters. So it probably sounds like a lot, but it's really pretty simple in practice. We're just going to insert a mono mixer, and we're not going to pan that yet. In the input, we're going to say locals, which lets us route signals from inside of our chain, but only in this chain. We can't route anything from a different output, like 1 or 2, only whatever we have on 3 and 4. But this lets us like circumvent the strict left to right chain model, essentially, by picking signal from wherever. We're going to set this up as the left filter. So if you remember, we use these buttons to determine whether we're picking the left or right channel off of a stereo unit. And the upper button is left, lower button is right. And so we'll press the upper button for the left channel of the Varispeed player, and then hit the enter key to grab that signal. And you can see our stereo selections reflected in the input there. Varispeed player number 1 left. So now this is just going to sound like a mono version because we haven't panned it. But we want to put in a filter, and by default filters in the 301 are ladder based, so they have gain reduction when you bump the resonance, which might not be ideal, but they sound very good. So we'll grab a ladder LPF, and we like the default settings, except we want full control over resonance. We might not want any resonance at all, unless we add modulation, because we probably want low end. And then this is the fundamental. It's the base frequency, and the volt per octave allows you to transpose that base frequency, the frequency of the filter cutoff. So we'll take the volt per octave. 440 hertz is fine as our fundamental. And once again, we're going to use the fader to control this, and we want the 7th fader out of 8. And there you go. You can see that goes all the way up. If I play this, you can hear that we are now filtering the signal. And I do want to control the resonance, so I'm going to add another fader for that. Actually, I want fader 6. So now if I play it, I should be able to, or wait, I need to set the gain. Bring that up to not 1, because we want to limit it basically to like the edge of self-oscillation. So maybe 0.63, and then we can listen to this. Pretty nice and juicy resonance for a digital filter. But The reason I didn't pan this is now a complete setup, but I want to just copy paste this whole mixer by holding shift and then dragging back and hitting copy. And now we're just going to differentiate these for left and right. So our first is going to be negative, which is panned left all the way, and panned right in this instance. And then we'll go back into the subchain, and we will pick the right side of our Varispeed player's output to patch in. And we also just need to change this to 8. So now we should have stereo filtering with independent faders for each side's cutoff and a single fader for resonance. So that's about it, and that provides you like a highly performable little drum thing with filtering. This is specifically directed at my friend Sleepy, so it may not apply to every situation, but it's a nice general introduction to like purpose-built 301 patching. And in this particular case, the 301 is the entire modular part of the case. It's just Performer 301 and Michigan Synthworks fader, both of which the Performer and the fader provide control for the 301. And it's a really fun setup. I would highly recommend it, even though it probably seems like a sin to lots of modular people or hardware people in general. There's nothing quite like the rush of loading up an entire preset on your Eurorack system and just going back to where you left off. But anyway, let me know if you need anything else answered, and I am just trying to like promote the 301 as a tool, so I would love to help out and demonstrate any other prospective patches.